Hello, friends. From the end of part 1 video of Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, we are now moving into part 2. We have seen that after a long illness, Mrs. Dalloway has returned to London as well as to health. She meets an acquaintance, Hugh Whitbread, in London, and also a neighbor. And then she's coming back home. She had walked among the many voices and people and colors of London, moved from the city to the quiet St. James Park, moved back to London to the same noises and colors, and then from there she went into the sweet-smelling shop of Mr. Mulberry's, where Miss Pym helped her. So in a wave-like motion, she moved in London, but she did not merge with the city. She is lonely at heart. The dark depths of her soul are inaccessible to anybody else. That evening, she is going to throw a party. Party is a place where friends and fun all meet. But Mrs. Dalloway, or Clarissa, is not so full of life. Her appearances do not match with her depths or reality. And she has also been thinking about death that morning. Mrs. Dalloway returned home after her purchases. This second video of the video series will talk about the scenes in Mrs. Dalloway's home mostly, up to Septimus Warren Smith's death. In the first part, at the beginning, we had heard about the Smiths. And then we came to know that it is Septimus and his Italian wife, Rezia or Lucrezia. Septimus is like a double for Mrs. Dalloway, a foil character. And he almost takes up a half of the novel. Mrs. Dalloway signifies sanity, while Septimus is insane. He is suffering from PTSD or shell shock after taking part in the First World War. Mrs. Dalloway returned home after her purchases. She's happy. She feels blessed and purified and grateful. She feels grateful to Richard for having provided her with a lot of luxuries in life, all the good things in life. When she comes, she is informed by Lucy, her maid, that Richard would lunch with Lady Bruton that day. Clarissa is not very happy because Lady Bruton has not invited her. Lady Bruton was an old lady with wrinkles on her face. She is the representative of a more patriotic, traditional, aristocratic era. And Clarissa already feels left out. She is aging, she has white hairs, and she feels alienated from the society. She feels left out. She feels like an outsider. Always. Especially since Lady Bruton has not invited her, but only her husband. In the face of Lady Bruton, she could read her own fate because it was full of wrinkles. She feared time, which was making her old. Time is a very important presence in this novel. psychological time or experiential time as against clock time. See this line. She feared a time which was making her old. Time. Beautiful. And this time made her fearful or aware, painfully aware of death. Time was cutting down her share of life, and she had fears or thoughts of death throughout the day. That morning, when she was walking in Victoria Street and Bond Street, looking into Hatchard's shop window that morning, she looked into Hatchard's shop window. Shop windows are a very important motif in this novel. Shop windows signal an urban life. And metropolis is a very important modernist metaphor. Metropolis, where the protagonist is walking, the city where the protagonist does not belong. He is walking or she is walking aimlessly. Walter Benjamin has talked about the flaneur, the concept of flaneur. And shop windows represent the emptiness of life. Looking into Hatchard's shop window that morning, Clarissa had pondered on the idea that she exists like in bits and pieces. Bits and pieces of herself might continue to live even after she died. She exists not as a whole, and some of her parts might continue to live. Indicating this fragmentary existence, the novel also introduces the character of Mrs. Dalloway or Clarissa in bits and pieces that fit together. She remembers a line from Cymbeline: "Fear no more the heat of the sun, nor the furious winter's rages." When she comes home to Dalloway House, we read that the Dalloway Hall is as cool as a vault. A vault is where dead bodies are entombed. Actually, this is the first thing that we learn about the Dalloway House. It is cool as a vault. This is our first impression. So, two kinds of life are juxtaposed here. The busy life of London, where she had plunged into, and the other kind of cold existence symbolized by the Dalloway House. Like Clarissa, Dalloway House also has a disparity between existence and reality. So, Virginia Woolf is suggesting a kind of death in life existence in the Dalloway Hall or the Dalloway House. Even though people are alive, it is like they are dead. This is reminiscent of the wasteland, and this is the very crux of modernism. Now let us move on. Clarissa felt an indescribable sense of loneliness. She continues to analyze her own self. There was something cold and virginal about her. She carefully protected herself from sharing her life completely with any man. She is very protective of her ideas and desires. She doesn't mingle with people easily. There is something virginal about her, cold and virginal about her, which accounted for her lack of response to Richard's love-making on various occasions. Now the husband and wife do not share anything at all except this house. She did not lack beauty and she did not lack brains, but something or the other she lacked, which made her so cold and frigid. but she was more responsive to the charms of women. Definitely a suggestion of homoeroticism. And we are going to talk about her girlhood friend, Sally Seton. She connected more with women. Women confessing as they did to some act of folly. Women opening up. That was more understandable and acceptable, and she shared more with women. Now, we should understand that what Clarissa seems like is not what she really is. The appearance is different from reality. She seems very virginal and nun-like. Virginia Woolf says nun-like, N-U-N, nun-like. Her daily acts are performed with a kind of religious devotion. But she's an atheist. She's a bundle of contradictions. This is how Virginia Woolf herself was. She was very English, but an outsider in English society. She was very Victorian in her character and behavior, but she revolted against Victorian values. So Clarissa is also like that. She is very religious and meticulous, ordered in her life, but she rebels against it. She is not religious. Already we have seen some of Clarissa's fears and worries in the process of her thinking in the London scenes. These are very similar to Ulysses. In Ulysses, Leopold Bloom and Stephen Dedalus, as well as Molly Bloom, are undergoing similar situations. As Clarissa walked about London, we saw her fears and worries. And now we thought she is strong and independent, but she is feeling insecure. And she is hurt by Lady Bruton's inviting Richard and not Clarissa to luncheon. She remembers death because she feels life slipping away from her. She is weak now, she is white-haired, and she is afraid of being neglected. And she could never find any companionship in men, including her husband, Richard. That is why, even though the novel is called Mrs. Dalloway, we have not met her husband, Richard, until now. Now we are told about her girlhood friend, Sally Seton. Thoughts of love put in her mind the memories of Sally Seton. Their friendship was almost like love. I have already told you in the first video that Virginia Woolf also had a lesbian partner, a female companion called Vita Sackville West. Sally Seton was a kind of a very queer girl, not in the modern sense, a very strange girl. She spoke of marriage as a catastrophe, but now she's a mother of many children at this time. Sally was afraid that marriage would part these two friends, Sally and Clarissa. She was the first person Clarissa ever shared secrets with or affection with. And Clarissa was like fascinated by Sally. In her girlhood, Clarissa was timid and introverted, and Sally was quite the opposite. She was everything that Clarissa was not. Clarissa, as I told you, was a rule-obeying, very meticulous and ordered woman. She put her life in order, but Sally always broke rules, and she did things like she smoked, she sat in a very unladylike manner. One day Sally even ran naked from the bathroom to take a sponge. She was a rebel, far from what Clarissa would be. And she was like the epitome of everything that a well-bred, decent girl of that century would not do. In those days, especially, it was very much impossible for a girl to open her mind to anybody. The relationship between a man and his wife was very formal, and there was no great sharing within a marriage. A sensitive, imaginative, and timid girl like Clarissa, especially, would find no companionship in men, because men always acted superior, and an intelligent girl like Clarissa cannot accept that. She could not tell her deepest thoughts to her husband. Virginia Woolf also was like that. She had a lot of male friends, especially in the Bloomsbury group, but she was prone to distrust their friendship, we are told. She wondered whether she was being patronized as a woman by her male friends. So this concept of sharing or giving and taking and the impossibility of it is central to Mrs. Dalloway as well as to Virginia Woolf's life. Clarissa rejected Peter because Peter was too much in love with her and wanted to share her life completely, and Clarissa was not ready to do that. She thought that Richard would be a safer option, but even Richard turns out to be not her kind of man. However, Clarissa had given her soul absolutely and completely to Sally. Sally had given her soul to Clarissa too, but she also gave it to everyone else. Sally was not like Clarissa. One day, Sally kissed Clarissa, and she impulsively kissed Clarissa, but Clarissa did not feel that it is just an impulsive gesture. Rather, she remembers it as a treasure. It is like a gift that had been bestowed upon her, and she cannot forget it. The memory of Sally's kiss is precious to her, even though this incident happened several decades ago. And she is even now thrilled. She is now emotionally responding to the memory of the kiss. This memory of the kiss is like a dead flower for her that you keep in your book and preserve for a very long, long time. I told you she had a virginal quality about her. All this is part of her virginal quality. This is the description. Then came the most exquisite moment of her whole life. Passing a stone urn with flowers in it. Sally stopped, picked a flower, kissed her on the lips. The whole world might have turned upside down. Clarissa can't forget that moment when Sally kissed her. This moment describes the pure love, a love that is not possessive, unlike Peter's love, a love that does not try to own her. No. Peter tried to own her, but Sally's love is pure love, a love not possessive but protective, conspirational against the world of fraud and pretense. It was a moment of sudden illumination, never to be forgotten. So remembering all this, she has come home, and then back home in Dalloway House, she is going upstairs. That is a very important scene. This going upstairs, like a nun withdrawing or a child exploring a tower. She went upstairs. She is walking upstairs, paused at the window. She stands here and looks out. There was the green linoleum, a tap dripping. There was the emptiness about the heart of life, an attic room. She is going upstairs to the attic room. There is an attic room where she goes often. That is the place where she finds the freedom to be herself. The rest of the house is Richard's. The attic is hers. Women must put off their rich apparel. That doesn't mean undressing. It means there should be some place where the women are themselves. At midday, they must disrobe. they should take off their rich apparel and just be themselves. She pieced the pincushion and laid her feathered yellow hat on the bed. Remember, earlier she had been compared to a bird. So, Clarissa's going upstairs is symbolic. What is it symbolic of? It is symbolic of her retreat from an adventurous life, from a public life, from a wealthy, pretentious life as Mrs. Dalloway. She is Mrs. Dalloway everywhere else, but in the attic, she is just herself. Richard Dalloway is not a domineering person. His character is not bad. He is quiet. He is unassuming. And he's probably scared of his wife. He doesn't know how to profess love to her. He doesn't know how to make her happy. We are reminded of Madame Bovary and her husband, Charles. They are both wonderful people, but the disparity between them, their nature, their characters, their desires is huge. So Richard Dalloway and the rest of his house are the peripheries of Clarissa's existence. But the attic is a safe nook for her to hide in. And this is the private quarters where she retreats to. And this kind of represents the deepest depth of her soul. Here, Clarissa can be all alone and she will not be disturbed even by her husband. In many novels, you have seen probably a retreat of women like this. I'm reminded of R.K. Narayan's novel, The Dark Room. As Clarissa mounts the stairs, she stops there and looks out and then again moves on. We feel a sense of loss. As she pauses midway, that is a very symbolic act. And the soft June air is blowing. She can hear the barking of dogs through the open window. There is a shroud of sadness that engulfs her. She has not lived successfully. We can't say she lived happily or successfully or harmoniously, peacefully in this house, which is her sanctuary. She just chose to marry Richard and rejected Peter's love just to escape what I said from Cymbeline, the heat of the sun and the furious winter's rages, which would mean the extremes of passion or unhappiness. She wanted to be moderate. She did not want the high passionate life that Peter would offer her. But she did not escape whatever she feared entirely. You know, any married life with a man would bring more or less the same kind of heat and winter's rages. She still remembers Peter like Peter remembers her, and she is traumatized by it. And when she looks at her daughter Elizabeth, who's 17 years old, she's kind of disappointed because Elizabeth is not growing mature in the manner Clarissa wanted her to be. Probably Clarissa is a domineering mother, that's why, because Peter thinks like that later. Elizabeth is too close to the influence. She's too prone to the influence of Miss Killman, the awful, monstrous woman who is a tutor to Elizabeth and whom Clarissa hates. And thus we see in these scenes very subtly through the stream of consciousness of Clarissa, through the analysis of the mental processes of Clarissa, we realize that there is a great contrast between the public image of Mrs. Dalloway, what she is on the outside, the appearance as the hostess. The public image of Clarissa is denoted by the word hostess. Peter Walsh, when Clarissa rejected his love, Peter Walsh had kind of like a prophecy told her that you are going to be a perfect hostess. It would mean, it is not a very positive thing. It means that she would just resign to a public life. She will not have the real life. So That is what she seems to have ended up as. She has ended up as the perfect hostess, throwing parties. But Virginia Woolf shows us that that is not all she is. She is going upstairs to the attic room now. What is she doing there? She is mending her green dress. She is arranging the folds of the dress and disguising the tear in the dress. It is symbolic of her life. The dress is symbolic of her life. It has rents or tears which she is hiding in the folds, and back and forth she draws a needle through the waves of green silk. Remember, these metaphors have come before. The waves of the sea, of the green sea, as analogous to the wavy motion of her mind. She's also moving back and forth in time, in memories. She's moving back and forth in London. And this wavy motion is indicated by the needle that is going through the green silk. The silk, green and wavy, like the sea, represents the vastness and freedom of the sea, which she does not experience in the Dalloway house. Mrs. Dalloway, Virginia Woolf very graphically says, Mrs. Dalloway plunges her hands into the green silk. Plunges is the word Virginia Woolf uses. And that is a very important and subtle metaphor. Okay, now let us move on. As she is stitching her dress, repairing it for the party, it is around probably 11:30 a.m. It is going to be 11:30 because in this coming scene, the clock will strike. Big Ben will strike 11:30. And Peter Walsh arrives. All of a sudden, he had been away in India for 5 years, and Mrs. Dalloway had no indication, or he did not give her any indication that he's going to visit her. Suddenly, he arrives out of the blue. And thus, Mrs. Dalloway's loneliness ends. In a very physical sense, it ends, but metaphorically, it only deepens. Peter Walsh is very vigorous man. He represents vigorous manhood, which Hugh Whitbread, her friend we met earlier, or Richard Dalloway does not represent. Peter Walsh had been her lover, and he is like Clarissa's opposite. If Clarissa is quiet and brooding and, introspective and timid and all that, Peter Walsh is full of life and adventure. But in life, he never became a success. Even in his college days, he was thrown out from Oxford, and he did not achieve any success in life as he would have loved to. And he's feeling inferior about it. He has returned after 5 long years in India, and he is now meeting Clarissa after a long time. He still loves her, and he still desires her, and Clarissa, even though he can't acknowledge it, and Clarissa also still remembers him painfully. In this scene, there is a moving, wavy motion back and forth between Clarissa's thoughts and Peter's thoughts about each other. They are both painfully aware of their own failures, and they think about each other, their past as well as present. Clarissa is surprised to have him arrive so unexpectedly, and for Peter, the reunion is kind of painful. After he has returned from India, Clarissa is the first person that he sees, and he still needs her. His wife is dead now, and he is in love with another woman, Daisy, in India. And he will have a life back there in India when he returns. And he is hoping to make like £500 a year, which is a comfortable amount of money for him. Not wealthy, he won't be wealthy, but he is now 52 and he's still capable of love. Clarissa is surprised, which perhaps she is not. She thinks about Richard, who is out with Lady Bruton, at this time, and she thinks of Peter and Richard both, and thinks perhaps she committed a mistake in refusing Peter. Both of them are unable to control their agitation in meeting each other. So She was thinking, Clarissa sitting at home, she was thinking that she is safe in her house, quietly preparing for her party. She was experiencing some very divine and, precious private moments when Peter intrudes into her silence and shatters it. Peter was always like that. This is why she rejected Peter. She is inwardly furious at the bad manners of Peter arriving unexpectedly like that, but outwardly she is calm. This is how she always is. Inwardly she is feeling something else. Outwardly she is calm. She is both furious and happy at the same time. She, even though she is furious, she is also happy. She pretends to be happy and she is happy and excited. She continues sewing, which is a metaphor for the state of mind at that time. Judging for appearances, we will not understand to what extent she is thrilled at seeing Peter. So the disparity between appearance and reality is very much at play here. She felt, if I had married him, this gaiety would have been mine all day. Whether she wants it or not is ambivalent. Sometimes she wants it, but sometimes she is overwhelmed by it. Now she had only the attic room and she is the lonely soul. Clarissa and Peter are painfully aware of the disparity between themselves. They realize how different they are. And also the disparity between how they think about themselves and what they actually say to each other. What they think is not what they say. They are also aware of it. This struggle between what they think and what they say is apparent beneath the talk. The talk is strained and forced and painful. Clarissa does not like Peter's silly, childish ways, but she loves his adventurous qualities, and in front of him she feels kind of inferior. She longs for Richard or Elizabeth so that she will feel strong in front of Peter, which is an irony. All this is irony. One of the main features of Mrs. Dalloway is irony. And Peter, in turn, is also feeling inferior. He has made no money. He is not a wealthy man and has none of these expensive things that he finds in Clarissa's house, which are all, indications of success. He is despairing that his life has been so disorderly and chaotic and unpredictable, while Clarissa's has been so ordered. And that is Clarissa's life, ordered life, is indicated by Richard Dalloway's success. It is because of Richard Dalloway's success that Clarissa has such a comfortable life, which he would never have been able to give Clarissa. So this irony, Peter has lived a full life, adventurous life that Clarissa admires, but he feels inferior and inadequate. Clarissa has lived a full, successful life with Richard, apparently, but she feels inadequate. So this disparity is the strain in their conversation. So what we are seeing here is two old people who are fighting their old age. Peter is still boyish and childish, but growing older than Clarissa. And Clarissa is still girlish and virginal, but she is white-haired and weak and frail. They had failed to be lovers long ago, 30 years ago, and now they are failing to be friends also. In their friendship, they are not comfortable. They feel very awkward talking to each other. Did you understand? Now, let us move on with the presentation. The Big Ben strikes 11:30 a.m. Just as Peter asks Clarissa if she is happy with Richard, that is the last question he asks her, then Elizabeth entered the room. The daughter, Elizabeth, entered her room, and the Big Ben also strikes 11:30, and Peter says he has to go and suddenly leaves. Peter leaves quickly. When he leaves, Clarissa shouts after him, "Remember my party tonight." That is a very important scene. She keeps reminding people there is party, and she keeps inviting people to her party. When she calls out, there is the roar of the open traffic. The traffic is roaring and she calls out over the traffic. We also hear the sound of clocks striking, 11:30, and her offer to Peter to inviting him to the party is barely heard probably. These sounds of traffic and clocks are the sound of life. She is trying to reach out to Peter over the rush of, or the noisy rush of life. These sounds of life are far stronger than the voice of Clarissa. And what is, after all, Clarissa offering Peter? Peter has come back after many years and he still wants her, and he has come to her first before meeting anybody else. And what Clarissa is offering is to be his hostess. Did you understand? What Clarissa is offering is to be his hostess. And that is what, she is condemned to be probably. This is a very important indication. This scene is a very important scene where time appears as a very important theme. Mrs. Dalloway, the novel, is an experiment with time. The clocks striking and the time trickling. This is all there in Ulysses also, as well as in Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man sometimes. The theme of time is very modernist. And Mrs. Dalloway is an experiment with time. One of the important aspects of the manipulation of time in this novel is the confrontation of clock time with psychological time. I have told you that already. And the transition from one personality to another, or from one point in space to another, is always marked by the chiming of some London clock. Not some London clock, usually it is Big Ben. So this is a scene where the tricking of time is felt. As Peter leaves the house, Peter thinks of Clarissa's girlhood, how she had been 30 years ago. She had been very timid. We know that even now she is, but Peter thinks that she has changed completely. She has changed from her timid, innocent self into a hard conventionality and prudishness. She is too strict with Elizabeth, and she is very prudish and conventional, he thinks. Peter is very critical of Clarissa in his mind, and this criticism is his way of controlling her or possessing her, which is what our Clarissa resented. For a moment, Peter feels thrilled about his Indian lover Daisy. He feels happy that he has Daisy and he will be able to have a life with her in India and get £500 a year, etc. About all this, Clarissa knows nothing. It is like she is trapped in her existence in this wealthy house. Peter feels happy and liberated. But at the same time, he regrets that she rejected him 30 years ago. Both are happening at the same time. And this scene, this wavy motion of his thinking back and forth, actually shows his insecurity and self-doubt. He is immature, which is what Clarissa didn't like. And he is not sure of himself. There is a huge, draining neediness in this man, Peter, which is what Clarissa was afraid of. This neediness, he depends on her, she thought at that time. This scared Clarissa. And St. Margaret's bell. It's a very famous, bell, St. Margaret's. In many novels, you can see references to this. St. Margaret's bell makes him think of Clarissa's death and of his own growing old. Both of them are growing old at this time, and he suddenly remembers Clarissa as, he thinks of Clarissa as dying, etc. Walking like this, Peter has reached the famous Trafalgar Square, which is a very important part of London, where he suddenly feels liberated and adventurous, and he sees a young woman walking and he starts following her for no reason. And this young woman walks and walks and walks, and he follows her. And then she comes to a house and takes out her key and opens her door and goes in. And Peter just stands there watching this. And then he decides to go to Regent's Park, which is nearby, and sit there and smoke for some time. Later that day, he has an appointment with some lawyers to discuss Daisy's divorce, and he decides to spend his time there in Regent's Park. All this time, Peter cannot keep Clarissa out of his mind, and he feels that Clarissa has grown hard and a trifle materialistic. What do you say that she has grown into the perfect hostess. He does not like the pride and possessiveness when she introduced Elizabeth to him as my Elizabeth. To Peter, it looks like she tries to possess and control Elizabeth too much, and he thinks Elizabeth may not like it. Now, Clarissa tends to overdo things, Peter, which Elizabeth might resent. Then on his way to Trafalgar Square, he sees some boys in military uniform. Still thinking of Clarissa in a highly critical manner, criticizing her insecurity and shallowness or worldliness or materialism, all of which our Peter himself is guilty. He is no better. He is guilty of all this, and he is criticizing Clarissa of it. Thinking like that, he walks and sees some boys in military uniform. Now that is also an important scene, because the boys in military uniform remind him of his own youth and patriotism and order and all that. So in this long scene, we are seeing Peter Walsh's mind and how he is going over the incidents of his life again and what influences him, and ultimately at Regent's Park, how he sees the other major character in the novel, who is Septimus Warren Smith. The boys in military uniform represent the world of duty, of love of England, of military glory, all different from the world of Peter and of the Dalloways. This is another London, another kind of Englishness. Now, he sat on a seat. There is an old nurse with a baby in a pram in the park, in Regent's Park, in one seat. Near that old nurse, he sat down. He did not want to sit alone somewhere where Peter would be, where somebody would ask him what is the time. He was afraid of being asked the time. He tries to avoid that, and he sat on this seat near the old nurse, and then he dozed off and gets a dream. He dreams of himself as a solitary traveler, and this traveler is thinking of different women. One woman might seduce him with her beauty. He also thinks of a maternal figure. And then he suddenly woke up with the extreme suddenness of the words, the death of the soul, in his brain. The death of the soul, those are the words that he suddenly remembers, and he wakes up with it. The words attach to a past as well as to a place. It reminded him of the summer at Boughton, the place called Boughton, where he had been so passionately in love with Clarissa, but Clarissa met Richard and married him. That incident comes to his mind. So this walk through London, in a way, like Clarissa was returned to London, Peter is also returned to London once again. And this evokes, like it did in Clarissa, this evokes in Peter memories of the past. And he is seeing London through unaccustomed eyes, like Clarissa also did after a long absence. And this metropolis that engulfs them and makes them feel an intense experience of loneliness, that is also a metaphor here. And in the interlude, there is an interlude when Peter is dozing and getting that dream. At that time, Virginia Woolf talks to us about the disparity between appearance and reality. How appearance is different from reality. We have seen throughout the novel. Now, Virginia Woolf is talking to us about this once again. We have seen multitude of appearances surrounding a certain reality and how elusive that reality itself is. So these themes are related to the tone of irony and ambiguity that is running throughout the novel. To take an example, both Peter and Clarissa have talked about or thought about the death of the soul. Clarissa was sure that she was saving her soul when she rejected Peter and married Richard. And Peter is sure that even today, death of Clarissa's soul began when she rejected him and married Richard. Did you understand? The death of the soul is a reality, but it is interpreted differently. Clarissa had thought that she is protecting her soul from dying when she rejected Peter and married Richard. But Richard is now thinking that Clarissa's soul has died the moment she rejected Peter and married Richard. So all these are various interpretations of reality. We don't know what is real. Then he feels that there was something hard and intolerant about her. He thinks about Clarissa and he feels that there is something very hard and intolerant about her. He remembers an incident when somebody got married outside, somebody got pregnant outside marriage, and Clarissa was very judgmental about it. He thinks that Clarissa is too intolerant and prudish. He felt that her soul has died. And he remembers that evening when Clarissa was talking with Richard Dalloway for the first time at Boughton, and he said to himself that she will marry that man. Peter immediately knew that she's going to marry that man. He felt that all was over with him and that Clarissa would surely marry Dalloway. At that time, he had felt like that. Now, that is, the time is around 11:45 to 12, and he's remembering the incident at Boughton, sitting on the seat in Regent's Park. He decided to settle the matter. He wanted to know for sure whether Clarissa would marry him or Richard. So he went and asked her, pressed her, forced her to tell him the truth. And she firmly said, "It is no use, it is no use. This is the end. I am not marrying you." Here, the novelist has shown us that Mrs. Dalloway is at the most crucial moments in her life. In this incident, probably her character is emerging gradually, but Peter's character has never really emerged. And in this scene, narratologically, Virginia Woolf shows a perfect command over the stream of consciousness technique, showing the character of both Clarissa, Peter, emerging, and how she takes that crucial decision in her life. She is discussing through stream of consciousness. At that time, Peter is sitting there watching things happening around him, and he sees a young couple. It is actually Septimus Warren Smith and Lucrezia Smith. And Peter is watching, and he sees a child running up to Razia's legs. Lucrezia is called Razia in the novel. A child is running up to Razia's legs, and Razia is helping the child to stand up when it falls. Lucrezia. Now, the narrative focuses on Lucrezia. Razia suffers intensely and thought the world wicked because she can't tolerate her life anymore. What happened is she was a hat maker. She and her sister were hat makers in Milan, where she met Septimus at the end of the war, and he married her and brought her to London, where she's feeling like an outsider. And Septimus is insane. He is completely out of his mind, and Lucrezia cannot tolerate his insanity anymore. She's suffering. Her trauma is great. And she's hoping that he is not insane, but this is only a passing problem. And she is struggling to do her duty. Septimus frequently has hallucinations, and it causes her a lot of trauma. And as he is sitting there, he sees Peter Walsh and thinks that his dead friend Evans, who had been killed in the war, is walking towards him. It is actually our Peter Walsh. Evans and Septimus had been inseparable friends, and Evans was killed in the war. And there is again a suggestion of homoeroticism there, probably. And he is reminded of Evans, and he keeps seeing hallucinations like that because of his PTSD. Then Septimus would start talking about Miss Isabel Pole. Miss Isabel Pole is the girl that he was in love with before the war. He wanted to be a poet at that time. Septimus was an aspiring poet at that time, and he loved a girl called Isabel Pole, who lectured on Shakespeare. And at that time, before the war, Mr. Brewer was his boss. He is an upper class man like Richard, and he was Richard's boss. When Brewer thought that Septimus is not healthy enough, he had sent Septimus to get some muscles by playing football. And he remembers all that, and the past keeps, filtering into his mind, trickling into his mind, like it happens with the sane people, Peter and Clarissa also. And there is a doctor, Dr. Holmes, who is treating Septimus. Dr. Holmes thinks that probably Septimus is not so ill, and Septimus is probably just habitually doing all these things, not really ill or insane. Dr. Holmes finds that the Smiths no longer trust him, and he suggests that they can meet another specialist. When Peter met Clarissa in her house, Peter was fiddling with his pocket knife. This fiddling with his pocket knife, this act that he does, shows his state of mind. It is like a manifestation of his latent thoughts. Like that, in Septimus also, the latent thoughts keep coming up. Even before the war, Septimus was absent-minded, and he did not care much about social niceties and social conventions. But now, absolutely, he doesn't do it. Even before the war, Septimus did things like he neglected washing his hands. These are small matters that Virginia Woolf discusses in the novel, but these small matters are like tips of the iceberg, suggesting what lies beneath these men. There is a certain similarity between Peter and Septimus. Like Septimus was an aspiring poet, he was a romantic and he wanted to be a poet. Like that, Peter was also a romantic and adventurous man who was too passionate and eager to show his love. He stammered, Septimus stammered, lectured on Shakespeare, did not take care of his health, and he had a very poetic and immature love affair with Miss Isabel Pole. And he was thoroughly undisciplined in his life, even before the war. So Septimus's life of indiscipline is similar to Peter Walsh's chaotic life. So there is a connection between Peter Walsh and Septimus, and now they are meeting at Regent's Park. Even though they do not talk or know each other, they are just meeting. Again and again, Mrs. Virginia Woolf's novels, all novels of Woolf shows marriage as a metaphor for insufficiency. The marriage between Richard and Clarissa, the marriage of Razia and Septimus, they are all indicative of insufficiency. And this insufficiency or inadequacy of marriage to contain the people engaged in it is probably metaphorically represented by Septimus being in shell shock. He married in order to find security and order in his life. And he was like sacrificing Rhizia for his own fear. Rhizia is intelligent and artistic, and Septimus used to read Shakespeare in the past, but the beauty of language has now vanished. Now, he is married and he is also suffering. Rhizia wants to have children, but he refuses to have children because he thinks that will only perpetuate their suffering. It should all be present tense. When you tell a story, it should always be present tense. Yeah. So now he does not want to have children. He wants to kill himself, and he knows that he is going more and more mad. He is actually fighting against his madness. He does not want to be mad, but he is beyond himself. He cannot help it. The war, therefore, has destroyed Septimus. We see that Septimus is a metaphor or an indication or leitmotif. His madness is a leitmotif for the inefficient way that Britain managed war. It is Septimus is a metaphor for the devastation of English society as a result of the war. And Septimus is feeling horror at what his life has become. He has become like a walking corpse because he could not control what had happened to himself. Dr. Holmes realizes that he cannot do anything about this situation. So he asks them to consult a very wealthy, aristocratic doctor called, a specialist called Sir William Bradshaw. Virginia Woolf depicts these two doctors as monstrous beings. We already met Miss Kilman briefly. She is the tutor to Elizabeth, who is like trying to control Elizabeth and force her religion upon her. She uses religion as a weapon to control people. These doctors are using medicine. Virginia Woolf is unapologetically searing in her picture of these two doctors. Holmes is ignorant and he's a lecher. He doesn't know what he's doing and he's greedy. He's a smiling villain, we can say. He is stupid, in fact, and he has no medical knowledge. And he thinks Septimus cannot be ill because he doesn't have any germs. He thinks that only illness creates germs. And he continues to treat Septimus, even though he can't help him because he likes to stare at Rhizia and be near Rhizia, etc. He's lecherous. He's very ineffectual. Sir William Bradshaw, who is supposed to be the specialist, is actually even worse than Mr. Holmes or Dr. Holmes. He recognizes when the couple meets William Bradshaw, he recognizes that Septimus is on the verge of nervous collapse. He knows that he can't help Septimus. Later, they meet William Bradshaw. I'm talking about that. And even then, he wants to experiment with Septimus. He does not really care what happens to Septimus. He does not really care whether he's able to help Septimus or not. But he just wants, to experiment on Septimus. They are like mechanical people, these doctors. They are like the soldiers. All mechanical people who don't really care about what is happening. They are mechanically, in the modernist society, they are mechanically just doing whatever they are doing because that is what rigid discipline and order has taught them to. Mrs. Dalloway, we can see throughout, stands apart. Even though she tries to put her life in order, she constantly rebels against it. She does not actually belong. Both Septimus and Mrs. Dalloway value a spiritual life. They don't want their life to be put in an artificial order, actually. They rebel against it. Sir William Bradshaw, because of his rigorous training, he has like become inhuman. He is not even like a human being. He is like a mechanical person who is after power. He makes his patients completely submissive, and he doesn't care about them, and he is completely alienated from his profession, we can say. So who is more insane here? Who is more alienated? Is it Septimus or William Bradshaw? Did you understand? Sometimes we feel that William Bradshaw is even worse than the condition of Septimus. Now, Peter Walsh is looking at the Smiths. He doesn't understand their trauma. He thinks that they are just a young couple and they are having some lovers' quarrel or something like that. He is looking at them and London around him, and he sees how everything has changed. Women are more liberated these days. There is a sexually liberated generation. Women have new fashions now of clothing and makeup, etc. And the newspapers also have become much more liberal. Even though he is reflecting on all this, his thoughts keep returning to Clarissa and Burton. Even though he keeps thinking of Clarissa, Peter tells himself, no, he's not in love. And he also examines his relationship with Daisy. As all this is happening, there is an old woman singing near the metro station in Regent's Park. There is a station, and she's singing. An old woman is singing a song about love and death. In that moment, both Peter and Rezia listen to the old woman, and they are united in their sympathy for this old woman. Both of them pity her. As I told you before, there is a parallel between Peter and Rezia, but Peter and Septimus, but there is also a parallel between Peter and Rezia. Peter is traumatized in life because of Clarissa's rejection. Rezia is traumatized in life because of Septimus's madness, which is like a rejection to her. Both are trapped in their isolation and trauma. And the funny thing is that they are not acquainted to each other. Peter and Rezia do not know each other. Now we have come across the character of Septimus very deeply now. We see a lot of social criticism in the character of Septimus. The character of Septimus is a powerful vehicle of social commentary. As a social critic, Woolf, all of Virginia Woolf's novels are, deeply infused with social commentary, but she carefully avoids propaganda and direct statement. Her social criticism is always expressed in the language of observation, through incidents. This is the same in James Joyce also. He does not directly talk about what happens in society, but very subtly, through incidents, they express, through observation, through what is happening around them. Characters convey aspects of social criticism through observation and contemplation. Virginia Woolf once wrote about her own writing. I think in a diary she wrote that the purpose of her writing is to criticize the social system and to show it at work at its most intense. The purpose of her writing is to criticize the social system, to show it at work at its most intense. So that is what she is doing here. I wanted to tell you. Back to Burton. By a natural, easy transition, the stream of consciousness flows back to Burton, Clarissa, and her friends. Impressions and memories are linked up emotionally, not logically. Sally was the best of the memories. Sally, remembered by both Clarissa and Peter. One strong bond between them was their common hatred of Hugh Whitbread. Both of them hated Hugh Whitbread. Peter hated, Richard hated. Why? Because Hugh had the most extraordinary respect for the British aristocracy. Clarissa found him vulgar. He has read nothing, thought nothing, felt nothing, she says. Everybody hated Hugh because he was just a colorless person, an unintelligent kind of person. He had once tried to kiss Clarissa also. For Sally also hated him. For Sally, he represented all that was most detestable in British middle class life. All the others are, the other friends are kind of intelligent people, very intelligent people, and they think deeply and critically, but not Hugh Whitbread. Right? Now, it is almost 12 p.m. now. Time is again trickling. Clock time is trickling, but this is different from the actual time. The actual time or the psychological time is moving in wave-like motion. Lucretia and Septimus meet Dr. William Bradshaw. Big Ben struck the hour. That is how I know it is exactly 12 o'clock. Rhea and Septimus have reached Dr. William Bradshaw of Harley Street. William Bradshaw and Lady Bradshaw are not seen through the stream of consciousness of the other characters in the novel. They are impervious to stream of consciousness because they don't have a soul. They don't have thoughts, perhaps. Virginia Woolf is not looking at them through stream of consciousness. The novelist had to indulge in some direct description to give us a pen portrait of the doctor, because it is impossible to show his soul, probably. Ironically, Virginia Woolf is refusing to show William Bradshaw through stream of consciousness. And it is a satirical portrait of the finest quality. Now, Sir William is the son of a shopkeeper. He is now apparently very aristocratic and very rich and all that, but he's actually the son of a shopkeeper, and that man had risen in life through hard work. He himself is no longer young. William Bradshaw is not young, but he makes a fine figurehead at ceremonies and speaks well. He goes to all the rich parties and he speaks very well. He apparently carries himself very well. He had a heavy and weary look together with his grey hair. It increased the extraordinary distinction of his presence. He immediately diagnoses Septimus's case as grave. He thinks that Septimus's case is very grave. He realizes that Septimus cannot be helped easily. Complete physical and nervous breakdown is what he shows. Septimus is showing complete physical and mental breakdown with every symptom in an advanced stage. Very soon he will die, or he is beyond help. He decides that Septimus must go to a delightful home. He calls it a delightful home in the country away from Rhea. He must be sent to a lunatic asylum. That is the meaning. He wants to send Septimus away from Rhea to regain a sense of proportion. But that is like trauma to Rhea. Rhea does not want Septimus to be sent away like that. Now, Virginia Woolf gives us in William Bradshaw a brilliant and drastic picture of the professional man, as I have already told you. He is the product, that is, of spiritual apathy, of ignorance, of the brute weight of non-awareness that afflicts 20th century world. The maladies of the 20th century world is what you see in William Bradshaw. He worshipped proportion and conversion. He was a man of indomitable will and quick, firm decision. He liked to impose his will on others. He was very domineering. He wanted to separate Rhea from Septimus, which was intolerable to her, even though it would mean nothing. There is no use doing it. Even though he knows that there is no use in separating Septimus from Rhea, he wants to do just that. He wants to send Septimus to a lunatic asylum. Now, from the Regent's Park, we move to the luncheon that Richard is having with Lady Bruton. Lady Bruton, Richard and Hugh Whitbread are meeting at luncheon. So after exposing the two doctors, Dr. Home and Bradshaw, Woolf is turning to this very elite luncheon party very ironically. Like, the two Doctors are devoid of the soul. The two doctors have no soul. They are like shells, like that. These upper class people meeting at the luncheon are also devoid of the soul. This luncheon shows how much Clarissa is an outsider to the English upper class. She is completely against the establishment, we understand. When she exposes these characters, Woolf is like building a tunnel behind the appearance of every character. She is exposing the character with satire and irony, and showing the pomp and stuffiness of English upper class establishment. Now, Lady Bruton has invited both Hugh and Richard for lunch. She herself preferred Richard because he was a much finer man. She did not like Hugh. Nobody likes Hugh. Lady Millicent Bruton, that is her name. She's a thoroughgoing conservative, a descendant of a family of generals. Herself, she is like a general, a warrior in many ways, a proud upholder of conventions and traditions. She is proud and dignified. So at the beginning of the luncheon, she is appearing as a very wealthy, proud, dominant, regal, we can say, regal woman, aristocrat, but she speaks very bluntly, etc. But towards the end of the luncheon, we see her as weak and helpless. She does not even know how to write a letter. She is a perfect Mayfair hostess. What do you mean by that? Mayfair is the area in central London which is the seat of posh life. It is in Westminster, one of the most prestigious areas in London where there are parties, and these days today we have clubs, all the expensive clubs, rich upper class life. She's a perfect Mayfair hostess, polite, hospitable, and observing all social proprieties. During lunch, Lady Bruton gives her guests the information that Peter Walsh is in town. All of them remember how Peter Walsh was in love, how much he was in love with Clarissa. They all like Peter, and they know that his life is a mess now, and they would like to help Peter, but it is impossible to help Peter. He has a flawed character, they think, and he is not rich, and he is beyond their help. They all remember Peter's hopeless passion for Clarissa. Richard thinks, when he realizes that Peter Walsh is in town, Richard thinks that he should immediately go home and tell Clarissa, in his own words, how much he loves her. Richard has never been able to do that. He has always wanted to overcome his habitual shyness and stiffness, his inability to love, but he has never been able to overcome it. Lady Bruton is a member of Sir William Bradshaw's clan of power maniacs. She wants to expound a project for emigrating young people of both sexes, born of respectable parents, and setting them up with a fair prospect of doing well in Canada. What is this? Lady Bruton is striving to fix the problems of post-war Britain. After the First World War, Britain has many problems such as an unemployment. A lot of young lower class people are suffering in Britain. She wants to solve all that by sending these young people to Canada. Immigration is what she thought. Immigration to Canada is what she thought would be the solution. She exaggerated. She had perhaps lost her sense of proportion. Emigration was not to others the obvious remedy, the sublime conception, the emancipation which it was to her. Other people did not think emigration would solve the problem, but she rather foolishly thinks that she should take the lead in helping young people to emigrate to Canada. So she wants to write a letter to the Times, the newspaper. And she does not know how to write the letter. She is weak. And she has called her two friends to help her draft this letter. This letter is written. And Hugh writes this letter. Richard finds that Hugh's letter is no good. It is ridiculous. But Lady Bruton, very foolishly, is delighted with the letter. So the deconstruction of the situation that Woolf tries to provide us is seen here. The time moves on. It is now 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. Richard, as you know, plans to confess his love to Clarissa. After the lunch is over, Hugh and Richard walks along the street, and they stop at an antique shop. They look through the antique shop window. As I told you, the shop window is an important metaphor. And there is a Spanish necklace shop, a jewelry shop. They go in there, and Richard thinks that he will buy a necklace for Clarissa. At the shop, Hugh is acting very pompous and, unlike Richard. Richard does not act like that. He is truly aristocratic. Peter and Richard neither of them are romantic people, even though Peter is more adventurous and passionate. He also doesn't know how to deal with a woman. And Richard doesn't know what gift to buy. He is feeling uncomfortable with the idea of buying a necklace because he doesn't know. It's a very personal gift, and he doesn't know whether Clarissa would like it. And he is, his thought of buying a gift for Clarissa is touched with apology and fear and insecurity. So he doesn't dare to buy jewelry, which is a very personal gift, but instead he chooses to buy some flowers, because flowers can be given and accepted very impersonally. There is nothing very personal about it. So he chooses a huge bouquet of red and white flowers. He would like to present these flowers to her, and he plans to tell her that he loves her. He is jealous of Peter. He knows that Peter has arrived, and he's jealous. And he reached home exactly when the Big Ben struck 3.5 hours. At this time, Clarissa is sitting at her writing table, rather worried, because she has just heard that Mrs. Marsham, a friend, has invited Clarissa's own cousin, Ellie Henderson, to the party. Clarissa doesn't like Ellie Henderson, and she cannot stand the thought of Ellie coming to the party. Another source of irritation for Clarissa was the fact that Elizabeth was locked in with Doris Kilman. She's even worrying whether Elizabeth has a kind of homoerotic relationship with the ugly and monstrous Doris Kilman. So she is thinking about all these things, and she is sitting in her room when Richard comes with the flowers. Richard gave the flowers to Clarissa somehow, but he can't bring himself to say one natural and beautiful "I love you." He is unable to say "I love you" to his wife. And ironically, he is replacing it with the natural and beautiful flowers instead. Instead of telling her 3 words, which he cannot tell her, which is very simple. It is very simple to say "I love you." And he's unable to say those 3 simple words. Instead of that, he is ironically giving her flowers. Clarissa is surprised because Richard never brings flowers or anything like that. She proceeds to pour her troubles into the ears of her husband. When he comes, she begins to talk to him about Hugh and Peter, and also about Kilman, and how she feared that Kilman is trying to influence Elizabeth too much. Richard also talks to her a little bit, but then as usual, he is in a hurry. He's a very, influential man, and he has a public life, and he has a meeting coming up in the House of Commons. So he does not even spend a lot of time with Clarissa. He immediately leaves. So, like flowers are separated, these two, the two husband and wife, these two people are also easily separated after a brief contact. Flowers represent separation. They are not together, even though artificially they can be put together in a bunch and given to somebody. They are not together. They are all separate. So Clarissa is once again alone with her memories. Nothing has really come out of her meeting with her husband. Now, there is a political thing happening at this time. The Conservative Party in Britain is about to lose power, and it will be replaced by the other party, which is the Labour Party. And Richard is involved in these politics, and Richard will resign after this political change happens, and he plans to write a book about Lady Bruton's family and ancestry after that. Uh, so that is why Richard has left. When Clarissa is alone once again, we follow her stream of consciousness and get another peep into her troubled soul. There is a certain dignity in people that they keep up, the appearances of dignity they keep up, but there is a gulf of solitude between the husband and wife. As we know, she is unhappy. She loves him, but at the same time, she cannot share anything with him. She is unhappy when he goes away. But she knows that something is missing in their relationship. So what do I mean? What does Virginia Woolf mean here? The characters are moving in a wave-like motion. We are moving in and out of character, in and out of their thoughts. Did you understand? Drifting in and out, slowly being carried towards the climax, which is, in this case, the party that Mrs. Dalloway is throwing that evening. Okay, we have not come to the final party yet, but before that, what is this? Parties. Clarissa is unhappy because Richard and Peter both do not approve of her parties. Both of them laugh at her parties. And Richard thinks that she is a snob and trying to show off too much. But she knows that this party is what she loves. Her parties give her the flavor of life, which is she's probably lacking. Peter makes out that she complicates life, which is really perfectly simple. Life is actually simple, but she makes it too much complex. That is what Peter thinks. She gave parties to bring people together. This is happening into the lighthouse also. Mrs. Ramsay gives parties, bringing people together, making them happy, which is a kind of metaphor for her own finding happiness in her life. When she makes people happy, she finds happiness in her life, by extension, metaphorically. But ironically, she is never happy. It is impossible to find that kind of happiness. She realizes always that she misses something in her life and relationships. Her life, her soul is empty, and she is lonely, like the attic room where she finds solace. So, Clarissa is very different from Richard or Lady Bruton or Peter. All these people have certain sins and weaknesses, and Virginia Woolf is trying to be critical of the upper classes in London, in England, to which Virginia Woolf herself belonged. At this time, Miss Kilman is with Elizabeth, or Elizabeth is with Miss Kilman, and our Clarissa is not liking it one bit. Elizabeth tells her mother that she's going out with Miss Kilman. Miss Kilman and Elizabeth both come to meet Clarissa. The moment they see each other, it is clear to both of them how much they hate each other. Miss Kilman lost her job as a school teacher when the war came, especially because she had a German surname and she was suspected of having German sympathies. And it was like 2.5 years ago that she felt the call of religion. Virginia Woolf is making fun of all this. And she became a twice born Christian. Born-again Christian, Miss Kilman became a born-again Christian. And now she has completely turned to religion. She is a frustrated woman. And after turning to religion, Miss Kilman feels that she doesn't envy the upper class women anymore. She only feels pity for them. She does not envy the upper class women. She only pities them, she thinks. Whenever she suffers spiritual anguish, which is actually, what does it mean? It means jealousy and frustration. Whenever she feels spiritual anguish like that, she prays to God and goes to some church. Now, on seeing women like Clarissa, refined and delicate and truly upper class, leading a very sheltered life with no knowledge of poverty and suffering, the only intention or desire of Miss Kilman is to humiliate them, to make them cry. She hates them, that kind of women, to have victory over their soul. So the relationship that Miss Kilman is having with Elizabeth is definitely a means of making Clarissa Dalloway cry, because that way she is making these upper class women conscious of her own spiritual power and superiority. That way Miss Kilman is feeling that she is superior. So Miss Kilman is like a religious bully, as I already told you, like Sir William Bradshaw is a scientific bully. And the Miss Kilman and Elizabeth go out. They, say goodbye to Clarissa and go out. Clarissa hates this vulgar woman who has taken her daughter from her and who she thinks is trying to possess her soul. Through Miss Kilman, Virginia Woolf is making her criticism of an all too common religious type, a religious kind of people she is criticizing, to which she believes not only frustrated women like Doris Kilman belong, but also a number of clergymen. The clergymen also belong to this category. Miss Kilman, symbolizes all that is worst in religion, the evils of religious fanaticism, intolerance, and bigotry. So while, and also Miss Kilman is in Dalloway's house to teach history, which is supposed to be a very objective subject, but this is a very subjective woman. How will she teach history is a mystery. And, while Mrs. Dalloway is waiting after the two women have gone out, daughter Elizabeth and Miss Kilman have gone out, she looks out of the window and sees an old woman in the opposite house climbing the stairs and looking out through her window. An old woman is climbing the stairs and looking out through her window in the opposite house. That woman doesn't know that Clarissa is watching her. And Clarissa has seen her often doing this. This scene is a metaphor for communication and the concept of privacy. When you look out of the window at life, when Clarissa walks in London, for another example, how communication takes place, how much we desire to communicate, but it is impossible to communicate. Communication is very difficult. Is it possible to communicate with anybody? You can only stand at your window and look out. Do you understand? Even within a marriage, it is like that. It is impossible to communicate with another human being. Communication is difficult. And what is privacy? Do you have it? Whenever you think you are lonely alone in your house and looking out of your window in privacy, you are always being watched. There is always somebody who is watching you. So this concept of privacy is also a myth. It doesn't really exist. And one thing I forgot to tell you is, as Miss Kilman and Elizabeth go out, very surprisingly, Clarissa calls out to them also to remember the party. You would never think Clarissa would invite Miss Kilman to the party, but she invites Miss Kilman also to the party. That party is an all-inclusive microcosm of the society. And also, what Mrs. Dalloway feels in her mind is very different always from what she does. So even though she doesn't like the woman, Miss Kilman, she would still invite her to the party. And Miss Kilman and Elizabeth go to a shop, a restaurant, and they have tea together, and Miss Kilman is looking at other people eating, and she's very pretentious and hypocritical. After that, Kilman goes away to Westminster Abbey to pray, and Elizabeth goes home. So there I will stop this part 2 video, because after this we are going to have the climax of the novel. Two important things will happen. Septimus Warren Smith will die and Mrs. Dalloway will throw her party. So that will be the next part of the video. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this part.